I stood in the middle of the grand ballroom, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light across a sea of familiar faces. They were all here, the same classmates who had mocked me, laughed at my torn sneakers, and whispered cruel nicknames behind my back. And here I was, at our old school reunion, holding a glass of water in one hand and trying to breathe through the tension coiling in my stomach. They stared at me like vultures spotting a wounded bird. Some snickered, others rolled their eyes. One of them, Derek, the boy who used to shove my head into lockers, nudged his friend and whispered something, and the two of them burst out laughing. I forced a polite smile and walked past them, my casual shirt and worn jeans making me look like the same kid they used to bully. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I owned the estate they were standing in. Every chandelier, every marble tile, every parking space outside, it was all mine. And when Derek made the mistake of grabbing my arm like he used to, his laughter dripping with the same old cruelty, that was the moment everything shifted. That was the moment my success turned the tables. The room went dead silent as I slowly turned to face him. And then, if you're curious about how everything got to this point, you're going to want to stick around. Watch and subscribe, because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about transformation, heartbreak, and justice. I'm Michael. I grew up in a small, cramped apartment in Baltimore with my mom and my younger sister, Emily. My father left when I was 8, leaving nothing but an old watch and a stack of unpaid bills. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and Emily and I learned early that we only had each other. I wasn't the cool kid at school. I wasn't even the invisible one. I was the target. My classmates mocked my clothes, my stutter, my cheap lunch. Teachers looked past me like I didn't exist. Derek was the ringleader, but he wasn't alone. There was Sarah, the queen bee who once poured milk over my homework. There was Marcus, who told the entire class that my mom cleaned houses for a living. I can still remember the day that broke me. It was the day of a school talent show. I had been practicing my speech for weeks, trying to overcome my stutter, hoping that for once they might see me differently. When I walked onto the stage, Derek and his friends started making chicken noises. My stutter came back full force. The entire auditorium erupted in laughter. Even the teacher at the side of the stage didn't stop them. I froze, humiliated. That was the first time I ran from a stage crying. It wouldn't be the last time I ran from something. But life outside school wasn't much kinder. My mom collapsed one evening from exhaustion and stress. I sat in a hospital with Emily, staring at my mom's pale face, promising myself I would never let anyone make us feel small again. That promise burned inside me like a fire. When I graduated high school, I didn't go to college right away. We couldn't afford it. Instead, I worked nights at a shipping yard and days at a small electronics repair shop. But every spare minute I had, I learned coding, investing, real estate. I read books on business strategies when my hands were still stained with grease. I built small apps on a beat-up laptop I'd salvaged from the trash. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. There were days I wanted to give up, days I hated myself for being the kid everyone used to laugh at. But then I'd think of my mom, of Emily, of that auditorium full of mocking faces, and I'd push harder. My first big break came when one of my apps went viral. It wasn't perfect, but it solved a problem no one else had addressed. And within months, I had enough money to quit my jobs. I started flipping houses, then apartment buildings. One day, I realized I was negotiating for properties with the same banks that had once turned my family away. The irony wasn't lost on me. Years passed. My mom finally retired. Emily went to college on a scholarship I funded. I built a business empire brick by brick, investment by investment. And when the invitation for the school reunion came again, this time at an upscale estate, I almost threw it away like before. But something stopped me. I wanted to see them. I wanted to see the faces that had shaped me, the ones who had pushed me down so far I had to learn to climb on my own. I wanted to walk into that room, not as the kid they had humiliated, but as the man I had become. So I went, and instead of a designer suit, I chose my most ordinary clothes. Jeans, a plain shirt, sneakers. No fancy watch, no flashy car. I wanted them to think I was still that same boy. The estate, of course, was mine. I bought it 2 years earlier, renovated it, and turned it into a high-end event venue. When the reunion committee booked it, they had no idea whose signature was on the contract. When I walked into the ballroom, the air shifted. The whispers started. Is that Michael? He looks the same. Wow, still dressing like that. They didn't even try to hide their laughter. Derek smirked at me from across the room, drink in hand. And then he came over. His grip on my arm was firm, mocking the same way he used to drag me down the hallways. Look who showed up, he sneered. Still the same loser, huh? But this time I didn't flinch. I turned to face him slowly, the weight of years behind my gaze. My voice was steady when I spoke. Derek, I said quietly, you have no idea whose house you're standing in. He laughed. What are you talking about? I just smiled. And that was the moment the tables began to turn. The glass slipped from Derek's hand and shattered against the marble floor, the sound echoing through the ballroom like a gunshot. Everyone stopped talking. Forks froze midair. The DJ lowered the music. All eyes were suddenly on us, on me, the boy they thought they still knew, and Derek, the self-crowned king of my nightmares. I leaned in close enough for only him to hear. This is my house, I whispered. This whole estate. Every chandelier, every wall, every blade of grass outside mine. For the first time since high school, Derek blinked at me without a smirk. Confusion spread across his face, quickly replaced by anger. You're lying, he spat, his voice louder now. You? Own this place? Yeah, right. You couldn't even afford lunch back then. I didn't need to, I replied quietly, and turned my back on him, walking toward the stage where the microphone stood. The crowd parted as I moved. A few people murmured my name. A few more stared like they were seeing a ghost. I gripped the microphone with steady hands. Good evening, I said. It's been a long time. My voice was calm, but inside my heart hammered. This was the moment. This was why I'd come. I'm Michael Turner. Some of you remember me. A wave of whispers. I could see Sarah in the corner, her painted smile fading. Marcus lowered his drink, eyes narrowing. I know what you're thinking, I continued. You're thinking I haven't changed. You're thinking I'm still that boy who couldn't speak without stuttering, who couldn't fight back, who hid in the bathroom at lunch. My voice tightened, memories cutting through like glass. But you're wrong. I paused. The silence stretched. The very ground you're standing on tonight belongs to me. This estate, your reunion venue, belongs to me. The reaction was instant. Gasps. Murmurs. Derek's jaw dropped. Sarah's lips parted in shock. Marcus muttered something under his breath. I could feel the shift in the room like a wave, rolling backward, pulling everyone with it. For a moment, I almost pitied them. Almost. But then Derek shoved forward, his face red, spittle flying from his lips. You're lying, he barked. You're just some repair boy who got lucky. You don't own nothing. He reached for me again. Old habits die hard. I stepped back, my security detail already moving from the edges of the room. They weren't dressed like guards, but I'd brought them for a reason. One of them caught Derek's arm midair and twisted it behind his back with practiced ease. Derek howled, the sound raw and animal-like. Gasps turned into shocked murmurs. Phones came out. Someone started filming. I took a slow breath. Let him go, I told my guard. He's not worth it. Derek stumbled back, clutching his arm, glaring at me with a hate that looked a lot like fear. That was when the principal, Mr. Harkins, retired but still proud, stepped forward. Michael, he said carefully, is this true? You own this place? Yes, I said. Every inch. He adjusted his glasses, frowning. Well, congratulations, he said stiffly, as though the words hurt his tongue. But there's no need for theatrics. I smiled without warmth. This isn't theatrics. This is the truth. And it's only the beginning. The room buzzed. People whispered, some looking ashamed, some curious, some calculating. The old hierarchy of high school was dissolving right in front of me. And yet, as I scanned the crowd, my eyes caught Emily's, my sister's, standing quietly near the back. She gave me a small, encouraging nod. My mom wasn't there. She couldn't handle the stress of reunions, even now. But Emily had come. Her presence steadied me like an anchor. I cleared my throat. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, I said, though part of me burned with the urge to. I'm here because I want you all to understand something. People change. People grow. And the ones you mock today might be the ones signing your checks tomorrow. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd, but it died quickly. I turned to leave the stage, but that was when Sarah, Queen Bee herself, stepped forward. "Michael," she said sweetly, too sweetly. "We wouldn't mean any harm back then. We were just kids. Surely you can't hold a grudge forever." Her voice, her smile, it was the same one she'd used to pour milk over my homework and call it a joke. Rage flickered in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. "You're right," I said softly. "We were kids." I'll let the words hang for a beat. But the scars aren't. Her smile faltered. I turned to leave again, but before I could take a step, Derek lunged at me, his face twisted in fury. "You think you're better than us?" he shouted. "You think money makes you untouchable?" Security caught him again, harder this time. The crowd gasped louder. Someone screamed, and then came the sound of sirens. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but the blue and red lights flashing through the tall windows told me otherwise. Police cars. More than one. My heart dropped. 2 officers stepped into the ballroom, their hands near their belts. "Michael Turner," one of them called out. I straightened. "Yes." "You're under arrest," the officer said flatly, "for fraud and embezzlement." The room exploded in whispers and gasps. Derek's face split into a grin. Sarah's eyes went wide. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. I stood frozen, the words hanging in the air like smoke. Fraud, embezzlement, arrest. And just like that, the tables turned again, only this time not in my favor. The ballroom that only seconds ago had felt like my stage now felt like a cage. Every chandelier's glint looked like an accusation. The marble floor that I had chosen myself suddenly felt cold beneath my shoes. The officers stepped closer, their boots thudding softly. "Mr. Turner," the taller one repeated, "please place your hands where we can see them." My instinct screamed to me to run, but I didn't. Years of clawing my way out of shadows had taught me one thing. You face the storm head on. I lifted my hands slowly, palms open. "What is this about?" My voice was steady, but my chest burned. "You're being charged with fraud and embezzlement tied to Turner Developments," the officer said. "You have the right to remain silent." His voice faded under the roar of blood in my ears. I caught Emily's eyes across the room. She was pale, shaking her head, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Derek, of course, was grinning like the devil himself, filming the whole scene with his phone. "Guest tables turned both ways, huh?" He whispered loud enough for people around him to laugh. The officer reached for the cuffs. Cold steel closed around my wrists. A ripple of gasps rolled through the crowd like a wave. For a moment, I saw my high school self again. The boy cornered in a bathroom stall while laughter echoed outside. But this time I was older, stronger, and I had secrets. As they began to lead me out, I spoke, calm, slow, just loud enough for the nearest guest to hear. "This is a mistake. You're arresting the wrong man. Tell it to the judge," the shorter officer muttered. They walked me past Derek, who leaned in close. "All that money, and you're still a loser," he hissed. I smiled at him, not a warm smile, but one sharpened by years of fire. "Enjoy tonight," I murmured. "It's the last time you'll see me like this." His smirk faltered for just a second, and then I was out of the ballroom and into the flashing red and blue. Cameras were already there. Someone must have tipped them off. Reporters shouted questions. "Michael, did you steal from your investors? Are you the real owner of the estate?" I ducked into the back of the police car. The door slammed shut. The sirens blared. As we pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of Emily. She was pushing through the crowd, her phone pressed to her ear, eyes burning with determination. Inside the car, the taller officer studied me in the rearview mirror. "You're taking this awful calm," he said. "I've been in worse cages," I replied softly. He raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. We drove in silence for several minutes. Streetlights streaked across the window like golden bars. My mind raced, not just with panic, but with calculation. Someone had set this up. Someone had timed it perfectly to humiliate me at the peak of my victory. And I could think of only 3 names who hated me enough to do it. The car stopped at the precinct. They led me into a fluorescent-lit room, took my fingerprints, and snapped my mugshot. The flash of the camera burned my eyes. "Turn left," a clerk said. "Turn right." My hand shook slightly, but I kept my face expressionless. They finally sat me in an interrogation room. Bare walls, metal table, 2 chairs. A single camera blinked red in the corner. I stared at it, unblinking. Minutes stretched into an hour. I thought about my mom, probably at home watching the news now, her hands trembling. I thought about Emily, who I knew would move heaven and earth to help me. I thought about Derek, laughing somewhere, thinking he'd finally crush me. The door opened. A woman in a navy suit entered. She was tall, composed, eyes like sharp glass. "Mr. Turner," she said, placing a thick file on the table. "I'm Assistant District Attorney Carol Hayes. We have evidence tying you to a network of shell companies funneling investor money offshore. Care to explain?" "I have nothing to explain," I said. "I don't run shell companies. I build homes. Check your facts." She arched an eyebrow. "We already have. One of your closest associates has turned state's witness." A chill slithered down my spine. "Who?" She didn't answer. She simply opened the file and slid a photo across the table. It was Marcus. Marcus, my old classmate, the one who had mocked me for my mother's job, but later, years later, had begged for a position in my company. I'd given it to him. I'd mentored him, trusted him. I stared at his smiling face in the photo, my stomach twisting. Betrayal burned hotter than fear. "He's lying," I said quietly. "I can prove it." "You'll have your chance," she said coolly. "For now, you're being held without bail pending arraignment." She stood. "Good luck, Mr. Turner. You're going to need it." The door slammed shut behind her. I was alone again. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes. My mind wasn't on the charges anymore. It was on Marcus, on Derek, on the game they thought they were playing. I smiled to myself, a thin, dangerous smile. They had no idea what I had prepared for moments like this. Because I wasn't the same boy they once humiliated. Not anymore. Just then, the door opened again. Not ADA Hayes this time, but a guard. "Turner," he said, "you've got a visitor." I frowned. "At this hour?" The guard nodded. "Says it's urgent." He stepped aside, and Emily walked in. Her hair was a mess, her eyes fierce. She shut the door behind her and leaned across the table. "We don't have much time," she whispered. "I found something. About Marcus. About everything." My heart jolted. "What did you find?" Her eyes darted to the camera in the corner. "Not here," she murmured. "You're in more danger than you think." Before I could answer, the guard cleared his throat. "Time's up." Emily squeezed my hands, slipping a folded piece of paper into my palm so discreetly the camera couldn't see. "Hold on," she whispered. "We're not done yet." And then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a click. I opened my palm under the table. The paper was small, crumpled. On it was a single line in Emily's handwriting. "They're framing you for something bigger. Marcus isn't working alone." I stared at the words, my pulse hammering. Somewhere, someone had set a trap so big it reached into my past and my present, and now was closing around me. The paper in my hand felt heavier than the handcuffs still locked on my wrists. "Marcus isn't working alone." My sister's handwriting trembled on the page, but her message was clear. This wasn't just betrayal. It was an ambush. I tucked the note into my sock just as the guard returned to take me back to my holding cell. The corridor was quiet except for the buzz of the fluorescent lights. Each step echoed like a countdown. My mind was already racing. Marcus couldn't have done this alone. He didn't have the brains, only the grudge. Someone bigger, smarter, had to be pulling the strings. Someone who wanted me destroyed at the exact moment I was finally standing tall. Inside the cell, the walls smelled of bleach and old despair. A thin mattress clung to the metal frame like a rag. Across from me, a guy in his 20s with a tattooed neck stared blankly at the floor. The door clanged shut behind me. I sat down, closed my eyes, and replayed the reunion in my head. Derek's face when the cuffs snapped around my wrists. Sarah's faux sympathy smile. Marcus's photo in the ADA's file. Emily's whispered warning. A puzzle was forming, and every piece had my name on it. Hours blurred. When I opened my eyes again, the tattooed guy was gone. A guard appeared at the bars. "Turner," he said. "Court time." They led me through a side door to a windowless corridor and then to a holding room near the courthouse. My attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn Ross, whom Emily had somehow reached overnight, was waiting. She stood when she saw me. "They're throwing everything at you," she said without preamble. "Fraud, embezzlement, wire transfer violations. If they stick even one of these charges, you could be facing decades." "I didn't do any of it," I said. "Marcus did." She gave me a measured look. "Then Marcus has been very thorough. We're not just fighting paper trails, we're fighting a narrative. Someone wants the world to believe you're a thief." I leaned closer. Emily said Marcus isn't working alone. Evelyn's brow furrowed. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet," I admitted, "but I will." She sighed. "First we get you out on bail. Then we talk about proof." A bail hearing. My heart thudded. In my head, I could already see the courtroom. Oak benches, the American flag, the judge's raised dais. And sure enough, when they brought me in, it looked exactly like that. Except it was packed. Reporters, cameras, strangers craning to see the fallen boy who owned the estate. As I sat at the defense table, I scanned the crowd. And there they were. Derek, in a press suit, sitting smugly behind the prosecution's side. Marcus avoiding my eyes. And my stomach dropped. Sarah, seated next to Marcus, whispering in his ear. The bail hearing began. The prosecutor painted me as a schemer, a liar, a man who preyed on investors to fund a lavish lifestyle. "He's a flight risk," the ADA said. "His assets are hidden overseas." Evelyn rose, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "My client is a businessman, a self-made entrepreneur who has given more to his community than most people in this room combined. He is not a flight risk. He is the victim of a coordinated smear campaign." The judge, a silver-haired man with glasses, steepled his fingers. "I've reviewed the evidence," he said. "I find the prosecution's claims concerning. Bail is set at $2 million. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Evelyn placed a hand on my arm. "We can post that," she whispered. "Emily's already moving funds." But before the gavel came down, a voice rose from the gallery. "Your Honor." Heads turned. Emily was standing, clutching a folder. Her face was pale but fierce. "I have evidence. Evidence that my brother is being framed." The judge frowned. "This is highly irregular." "Please," Emily said, her voice cracking but strong. "Just look." She held up a set of printed emails. The ADA stood. "Your Honor, this is a stunt." "Bring it forward," the judge said, curiosity winning over procedure. Emily walked down the aisle, her hands shaking. She handed the bailiff the folder, who gave it to the judge. He adjusted his glasses and flipped through the pages. His brows rose. "These are bank records," he said slowly. "Wire transfers from Turner Development's accounts, but authorized not by Mr. Turner, but by." He squinted. "Marcus Reed." The room went dead silent. Marcus shifted in his seat, his face draining of color. Evelyn seized the moment. "Your Honor, we request immediate release on bail and a formal investigation into Mr. Reed's activities." The judge banged his gavel. Bail granted. Court adjourned. Chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Marcus bolted for the door, but two officers intercepted him. Derek stood frozen, his mouth open. Sarah grabbed her purse and started inching toward the exit. The guard removed my cuffs. My wrists ached, but I stood tall, scanning the room until my eyes locked on Marcus. For the first time, he looked like the boy cornered in a bathroom stall. I walked past him slowly. "This isn't over," I said softly. He swallowed hard but said nothing. Outside, the courthouse steps were a sea of flashing cameras. Emily slipped her arm through mine. "We've got it now," she whispered. I shook my head. "Not yet. Marcus is just the front. There's someone bigger. Someone who set this up and used him as bait." Emily frowned. "Who?" I stared out at the crowd, my mind flicking back to faces from the reunion. And then, like a flash of lightning, the realization struck me. I knew exactly who it was. The crowd outside the courthouse roared like an ocean of noise. Cameras flashing. Microphones shoved forward, questions flying like arrows. "Michael, are you cleared of all charges? Did Marcus frame you? Who's really behind this?" I didn't answer. My jaw was clenched my hand tight around Emily's. The flashbulbs felt like lightning strikes, but inside me there was only a quiet, gathering storm. We pushed through the sea of people into Evelyn's black SUV. The door slammed, cutting off the noise. For a second, silence. Then Evelyn twisted around in the passenger seat to look at me. "Talk to me," she said. "I know that face. You've figured something out." "I have," I said, my voice low. "I know who's behind this." Emily's fingers tightened around mine. "Who?" I stared out of the tinted window as we pulled away from the courthouse. The image burned in my mind. Sarah leaning close to Marcus at the hearing, whispering, guiding. The queen bee who had tormented me more viciously than anyone, who had a knack for making other people do her dirty work. "Sarah," I said finally. "It's always been her. Marcus was the bait. Derek was the smokescreen. But she's the one who set the trap." Evelyn frowned. "You're sure?" "She married into old money," I said. "She has connections. And she always hated me the most because I wouldn't grovel like the others. She knew Marcus worked for me. She used him to plant false authorizations. And she timed the arrest for the reunion. It was her grand performance." Emily swallowed. "But how do we prove it?" I leaned forward. "We don't just prove it," I said. "We flip it. We make her walk in her own trap." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Sarah thinks she's the smartest person in the room," I said. "She loves control, loves pulling strings. If I act like I'm beaten, she'll get bold. She'll make a mistake." Emily nodded slowly. "And you'll be there to catch it." "Yes," I said. "But we need bait she can't resist." We spent the next hour in Evelyn's office, blinds drawn, plotting. Evelyn pored over the bank records Emily had brought. "She set up a dummy consultancy," Evelyn murmured. "Marcus routed the transfers through it. But the IP addresses, they're masked." "Of course they are," I said. Sarah was always tech-savvy. She knew how to cover her tracks. Emily spoke up. "What if we don't go after the money? What if we go after her ego? She won't be able to resist showing off." I looked at her and smiled. "That's my sister." We hatched the plan, a press conference at the estate. I would announce a new partnership and hint that I was willing to settle everything quietly with the real mastermind. We'd plant the right words, the right bait, and wait for Sarah to bite. Evelyn would have a private investigator on standby, feeding us live intel. 3 days later, the estate was buzzing with reporters again. The same chandeliers, the same marble floors, the same people who had once laughed at me. Only now they were silent, waiting. I stood at the podium, Emily at my side. Cameras clicked. "Thank you for coming," I began. "There's been a lot of speculation about the charges against me. Today, I want to set the record straight." I paused, letting the silence stretch. I've been advised not to speak, but I've decided to take a risk. I know who framed me, and I'm prepared to offer them a way out, quietly, without charges, if they come forward within the next 24 hours. A gasp rippled through the room. Reporters' hands shot up. "Mr. Turner, who is it? Do you have evidence?" I smiled faintly. "The evidence is already in motion. This is their only chance to stop it." We ended the press conference there. Cameras kept flashing, but I was already scanning the crowd. And there she was. Sarah. Perfect hair, designer suit, a glass of wine in her hand. Her eyes met mine across the room. She tilted her head, a small, taunting smile playing at her lips. She was taking the bait. Later that night, in the security room on the top floor of the estate, Evelyn, Emily, and I watched the hidden cameras. Sarah had stayed behind after the press left, claiming she'd forgotten her purse. Now she was moving through the hallway near my private office like she owned the place. "She's going for your desk," Emily whispered. "She thinks the evidence is there," I murmured. On the screen, Sarah slipped inside my office and closed the door behind her. We watched as she pulled a USB drive from her bag, plugged it into my computer, and began typing rapidly. Evelyn snapped photos of every move. "She's downloading something," Evelyn said. "She's planting something," I corrected. 5 minutes later, Sarah slipped out of the office and down the hallway, her purse now heavier. She didn't know every step had been recorded. Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. "Our investigator just sent confirmation," she said. "The dummy consultancy's server logs show a live connection from Sarah's IP address tonight. She slipped. I exhaled slowly. "We've got her." But before relief could settle in, the security guard's voice crackled over the intercom. "Mr. Turner, there's a problem. Sarah isn't alone." "What do you mean?" I asked sharply. "She's with someone. A man in a gray suit. He has a badge. Looks like federal." My heart dropped. On the camera, Sarah stepped into the driveway with a tall man in a gray suit carrying a briefcase. He opened it just enough for the camera to catch a flash of an official seal. They spoke briefly. Then he handed her an envelope. She smiled, tucked it into her bag, and the two of them got into a black car and drove away. Evelyn's face had gone pale. "That wasn't just a helper," she said. "That was a federal agent. She's got someone inside." Emily whispered, "Michael, how deep does this go?" I stared at the blank monitor where Sarah had been moments ago, my fists clenching. She hadn't just framed me. She was working with someone powerful enough to put agents in her pocket. "I don't know," I said quietly, "but I'm about to find out." And as the car carrying Sarah disappeared into the night, I felt it. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next 48 hours were a blur of quiet moves. While Sarah thought she'd walked away with an upper hand, Evelyn, Emily, and I had been feeding the federal agent false breadcrumbs from start. Every USB Sarah ever plugged in, every document she downloaded, was a carefully prepared decoy pointing to a non-existent offshore fund. By dawn of the second day, our investigators sent a text. "She's in Lagos. She thinks she's meeting her handler." We were already there. At a discreet rooftop restaurant overlooking the marina, Sarah sat across from the gray-suited man, both of them giddy with their success. She didn't know Evelyn had tipped off an actual task force, one that had been building its own case on corrupt federal insiders. Emily sat in a surveillance van below, headset crackling. "She's bragging," Emily whispered. "She thinks you're ruined. She's taking credit for everything." I stepped out of the elevator and onto the rooftop. The sunset painted the water gold. Sarah's laugh floated across the tables until she saw me. Her smile faltered. "Michael," she said, still trying for a sneer, "you've got nerve." "No," I cut her off. "You've got nerve. You thought the old class clown would never fight back. You were wrong." The gray-suited man reached for his briefcase. But before he could open it, two real federal officers appeared at the terrace doors, badges raised. Sarah Atwood and David Clark, one barked, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud, cybercrime, and obstruction of justice." Sarah's face went white. "This is a mistake. They've got the server logs," I said softly. "They've got the videos of you planting evidence in my office. And the federal agent you were feeding? He was ours." Evelyn stepped onto the terrace behind me, her phone still recording. "Smile for the camera, sweetheart." Sarah lunged for her purse, but the officers pinned her wrists and snapped on the cuffs. The gray-suited man didn't resist. He just sagged, muttering. As they were led away, Sarah twisted her head to glare at me. "You'll regret this, Michael." I held her gaze. "I already regretted letting you walk all over me. Not anymore." The next week, the headlines flipped. Reunion Queenpin exposed. Billionaire CEO cleared of all charges. Federal agent and socialite charged in elaborate frame-up. In the courthouse where I had once walked in handcuffs, the charges against me were dismissed in minutes. Emily squeezed my hand as the judge banged the gavel. Evelyn winked at me over the defense table. Outside, cameras flashed again, but this time, cheers rose from the crowd. Former classmates who had mocked me now stared, humbled. The very people who once whispered failure now held up their phones to record my vindication. I took a deep breath. For years I carried the weight of their laughter. I said quietly to Emily, "Today, I'm done carrying it." She smiled. "So what now?" I looked back at the courthouse one last time. "Now," I said, "we build, not for revenge, but for something better. But if anyone comes for us again," Evelyn grinned, "they'll think twice." That evening, at the same estate where it had all begun, I hosted a new gathering. Not a reunion, but a scholarship gala in Emily's name for kids who'd been bullied, overlooked, or underestimated. The chandeliers glowed warm, the hall filled with laughter that didn't cut but healed. As the night wound down, I stood at the balcony, the city lights stretching before me. The storm had passed. Below, Emily and Evelyn were laughing with the first batch of scholarship students. For the first time in years, I felt light. Sarah was gone. The old ghosts of the reunion were gone. I whispered into the night. They thought they knew me, until my success turned the tables. And this time, it wasn't a threat. It was the truth.